We've got the camera mother load here. There's a dozen digital cameras from micro four thirds to DSLR cameras to point and shoot, and some really nice bridge cameras in here. So let's jump right into testing them, ascertaining value, and looking at some sample images that these very cameras have taken. Strawberries. The only thing I like better than a good strawberry is a great camera. My name's Kevin. I've been buying and selling used digital cameras now for the past 15 years, and I've been doing it full time for 7 years. And I've sold over 25,000 cameras in that period. So I have a pretty good idea of models and value and how to test them properly. And I end up selling a lot of these cameras here in the United States on websites like eBay. Almost all of the cameras over here were purchased locally through Facebook Marketplace, garage sales, and estate sales. So kind of a different type of lot for me. If you've watched any of my prior videos, you know I tend to do a lot of untested digital camera lot boxes. All of these, about half of these I was able to test because they had batteries, and I was able to make sure that they're working, and the other half are not tested, and we'll go through and see if they work. So first camera, like I said, OMD EM10, and this was the third camera in Olympus's OMD Micro Four Thirds line. And it was kind of in the middle price point. I believe this retailed for around $700 when this camera was released. As you can see here, everything looks pretty good cosmetic-wise. I spent $150 on this camera, so it definitely paid up. The original owner insisted that it was working, and I was able to test it and make sure that it took pictures when I picked this up from the seller that I bought it from. And this camera is pretty cool because it's got a couple manual control wheels for any sort of manual capability. And it's got a built-in viewfinder here. There's a little bit of wear on the viewfinder that I noticed down here on the bottom. I should be able to get that cleaned up. The sensor looked good. The camera's a little bit dusty because the original owner said they hadn't used it in quite a while. This has the original, I believe the original kit lens of the 14-42 2R, which is it's an okay lens. It's just your normal kind of cheap plastic kit lens. There are many other Micro Four Thirds compatible lenses that would work great for this in the $100 to $200 price point that would really expand the capability of this camera body. I've shot with this quite a bit over the years and I've been really happy with it. So one thing to note in comparison of this camera vintage, it's 2014, so about 10 years old, is a lot of the non-Canon and Sony branded cameras in that period, like Fuji and Olympus, their video capability is pretty iffy. It's pretty soft, tough to get autofocus to work properly, and it's not something that is a big plus on these cameras. So what I'm going to be talking about with this one is specifically just still photography. So what I love about shooting stills with this camera is the color accuracy right out of the camera, even in auto mode, is really excellent. Take a few sample pictures inside, and then I'm gonna take this camera outdoors and we'll take some pictures outside. So my namesake prickly pear, they are blooming everywhere right now in southern Arizona. So a lot of the pictures that you're gonna see throughout this are gonna be a variety of different type of cacti and blooms, as well as a lot of other plants and bushes that are also blooming right now. So autofocus a little bit noisy. This does have in-body stabilization. So if your hand is shaking a little bit, I believe it's got 3-axis in-body stabilization. It's not as good as the 5-axis of future models of Olympus, but it does a decent job, but it is a little bit noisy. Autofocus is working well. Let's see, oh, there's the flash. The flash has got an interesting button. It's really recessed right here and you gotta push it right there, pop. Then it pops up. So I'm gonna test the flash as well. Yeah, flash is working fine. So not seeing any issues with this camera. And physically and cosmetically, it doesn't appear to have been used that much. It's a really delightful camera to shoot with. Bit of a throwback. And in the used market, in good working condition with a charger and accessories, you'd be looking at a value of about $250 on this. So once you factor in fees and expenses, I'll probably profit about $75. So not a huge moneymaker, but didn't take that much time and was able to get it tested really quickly. All right, next up, we have another mirrorless camera, but this is in the Sony. And this is a Sony A3000. Also picked this one up locally as well for $100 and was able to test it. It's in decent working condition. It does have some wear to both the LCD and the bottom of the camera, but otherwise not in bad shape. Functionally, it looks like a DSLR camera. It's got a pretty big body, a big grip, but this is actually the Sony NEX E-mount, and it's a mirrorless camera. So unlike the NEX bodies, like the NEX 3, NEX 5, which is very compact, this is something that Sony created to try to mimic a DSLR while providing a Sony E-mount. And frankly, this was a one and done series. So they only made one in this bigger body style because what they found was it didn't really resonate with consumers. So consumers thought when they looked at this body, they were getting a DSLR camera with a lot of manual functionality. And there is some manual functionality, but not as much as a traditional DSLR. And frankly, it didn't meet Sony's expectations in terms of overall sell-through. This was more of a budget camera when it was released. I believe the MSRP was around $400. Even for that price, they had a hard time really moving a lot of these models. So they ended up getting discounted towards the end of their life. There we go, powered on. So one of the weird things about this camera right out of the gate is there's this button here for Finder and LCD. So a lot of cameras like that Olympus, whenever you put your eye next to the viewfinder, it has a auto sensing capability and will move back and forth between live view and the viewfinder. This camera, however, to view both the menu and to use live view, you need to toggle between this and the actual viewfinder. And it's a little bit annoying. So to do that, now I'm looking at only the viewfinder, but when I press menu within that, it will only show in the viewfinder, and then you have to click back. So it's a little bit clunky. The other thing that you noticed is in the hand, it's very light. This does not feel so quality compared to a heavier body, especially when you take this lens off, it just feels almost toyish. Now don't get me wrong, internal wise and guts, this is still a more than capable camera, and I'll pop some pictures on the screen of pictures that I will take with this outside, and you get an idea of what this is capable of. I do prefer the Olympus in terms of color accuracy and autofocus, but this camera also takes good pictures, and if you pair it with a better lens than this 18-55 kit, you can also get some good pictures. So if you pair it with like a 50mm prime, or you pair it with a telephoto Sony lens or aftermarket Sony NEX compatible lens, you can still get some great pictures out of this A3000 body. So for $100, how did my investment go? Similar to that other one, I'm gonna close to double my money. In the used market on a website like eBay in the US, you'd be looking at a value of about $200 on this camera. So once you factor in fees and expenses, again, I'll have made about $75 on this model. Next up, let's do this one. So this is a camera I actually found at a garage sale last week. And we've got a Canon PowerShot G5 camera here. This is a 5-megapixel CCD sensor camera with a 2003 release date. So 21-year-old camera. And I spent $5 at this. There was no battery when I purchased it at the garage sale, so I bought it as is untested, and I haven't tested it to see if it works yet. So let me go ahead and grab a battery. And it uses the BP511, like I said. So let's go ahead and power it on and see if this camera powers on. Nice, it does power on. Got the little bird logo for Canon on the menu. So this is a cool camera. It's got a hot shoe on top if you wanted to affix an external flash on top. It's got raw shooting capability, and it's got a lot of manual functionality that was pretty unique at the time this camera was released over 20 years ago. So this camera, when it was released, was a almost $800 camera and was kind of latest top of the line. This one, as you can see, does have some wear. The lens glass looks good. There's some stickiness, I think, where the price tag was attached right here. So I'll get that cleaned up with some Gooby Gone type stuff that I use. And this camera uses compact flash for memory. There's not one in there. And compact flash, if you're not familiar, is a bigger type of memory. It looks like this versus a SD or micro SD card for that matter. Moving in and out fine is rather noisy, and that's very common with older Canon PowerShot models. So let's go ahead and try taking a few pictures. I'm in auto mode here. Okay, took a picture, and we've got that cool little Canon noise, which you can turn on and off in the menu. I like to keep it on, it's kind of nostalgic. And this camera takes good pics. So what I've noticed about using this is the flash is a little bit slow to fire and to charge, but the white balance and color accuracy just right out of the camera are really quite good. And the image processor that Canon used in this was a step up from the prior generation, Canon PowerShot G3 and G2, and that made quite a bit of difference. Autofocus still a little bit slow, especially on the outer end of that range, but really delightful camera to shoot with. I love shooting with this, and most of the Canon PowerShot G series takes great pictures. So if this camera wasn't working, like I said, I bought this untested, it would be a bit of a brick, not much value, maybe 10, 15 bucks. Because it is working, and if I pair it with a charger and a USB cable and the compact flash card that I put in, you'd be looking at a value of about 85 bucks on this camera. So a really good return on investment. A lot of this is model specific. So a lot of the cameras that you'll see are going to be lower end brands like Polaroid and Vivitar at garage sales, and a lot of those don't have really much value at all. So a lot of it depends on the brand name and the model number if you're not that familiar with cameras. A quick Google search will take you a long way, but I've been selling cameras for so long that I'm able to ascertain value just by looking at them without having to look them up. And you can do that with all sorts of categories. I know a lot of people are experts in glassware and ceramics, and they can tell exactly what something is from a mile away. I can kind of do that with cameras. It's one of the good things about becoming hyper specialized in a specific area. Next up, we've got a really well-used Sony DSC W810 Cybershot. This is a 20 megapixel camera that's basically identical to the W800 and W830, and came in a variety of colors. We've got the one in silver here. Got this at a garage sale for 10 bucks. There was no battery, again, untested, so not sure if this one works. Uses the Sony NPBN1 battery. There is some wear to the LCD, as you can see. I can get some of that cleaned up, and I'm hoping that that spotting isn't like imprinted on there. But I should be able to get that cleaned up with some spray. I don't think this camera's been used in quite a long time, but it was used, and used a fair bit, it looks like. And let's see if it turns on. It does turn on. Got some lens wear over here. It looks like remnants of something almost glue-like. But the lens moved in and out. Let's see if it moves in and out fine. It does. So we'll get that cleaned up. Definitely some lens noise there. A little bit more than normal for Sony. Let's try taking a picture. Okay, picture looks okay. Flash does fire, so that's good news. No internal memory space remaining. Delete all images. Yes. Deleting. This uses regular SD card for memory, and it looks pretty good. The lens has a little bit of wear. Let me go ahead and turn that back on. There are some very small micro scratches on the lens, and normally those little micro scratches don't actually affect the picture quality. But that I will go ahead and take this camera outside. We'll do a little bit of testing with it. I'll pop the images on the screen, and we'll get an idea of what this camera can do and if those little scratches affected the pictures at all. This is a very popular camera. It has a 6x optical, and in a really, really slim body like this, that helps out quite a bit to get closer to the subject. And you know, the flash is super powerful, so indoors with poor lighting, this does a pretty good job compared to a lot of its competitors at this price point. And this was one of the last Sony really portable budget slim cameras at a under $150 price point that Sony released. I believe this was in the 2015-2016 timeframe. And that's when the digital camera market was starting to go down as a result of the introduction of way better cell phone cameras. So this particular model has gone up actually in value, and the value of this in its current condition with those light lens glass scratches, and I didn't see anything in the pictures taken that made it seem like those would actually affect the picture quality. You'd be looking at value on this camera of about $100 in superb condition with the original box, which does add value. I've seen this sell for $125, $150. Oh yeah, another garage sale find, Olympus D720. And this camera's in really nice shape. There was a battery in there, so I was able to test it. And I spent 10 bucks on this camera. So a lot of the digital cameras that I find at garage sales tend to be priced at like $2, $5, $10, sometimes 20 bucks. And normally if there's not a whole lot of margin there, I'll negotiate with the seller a little bit. but 10 bucks was a fair price for this in good working shape. So this is a 14 megapixel Olympus digital camera with a 10x zoom that Olympus released around 10, 12 years ago. Also quite compact, as you can see, but still retains a pretty good optical zoom. And I've always enjoyed shooting with Olympus. They've never had the market share in their compact cameras that brands like Nikon and Sony and Canon have had. They're probably number 4 or number 5 market share during that time frame. But in terms of optical image capability, really fun to shoot with. Lens noise, quite low on this one. As you can see, it's in pretty good shape. I'll just get the lens glass cleaned up a little bit. And this camera is super smooth and quick to autofocus. I'm gonna go ahead and take this outside. We'll get some pictures of some of the cactus and flowers taken with it. What I noticed, just kind of similar along with that Micro Four Thirds first Olympus that we looked at, is the color vibrancy out of the box of these in auto mode in most Olympus cameras is really quite good. The coolest feature about this is when I got it and I was taking pictures at the garage sale. Did you hear that? Listen to the sound. It's got like a little squeaker toy sound whenever you take a picture and use the shutter button. Really, really funny. Made me and the seller actually laugh out loud whenever we were discussing this camera. This camera doesn't have a ton of value. If I pair this with a charger, and I happen to have a number of chargers for this camera, you'd be looking at a value of around 50 bucks on this camera. So not a great return on investment. Once you factor in shipping costs and box fees and all that stuff, you'd be looking at a return of maybe like 25 bucks profit on this camera. Okay, another garage sale camera. And we got a bridge camera here. This one actually came with a charger. Normally these are gone, but it looks like they lost their original and gave me a replacement charger. I've got a Panasonic Lumix DMC FZ20 or FZ20 for all you Canadians and international viewers out there. So this did come with a charged replacement battery, so I was able to test it at the garage sale. And he was asking 10 bucks for it, and I went ahead and took it after I tested it and found that it was working. So let me go ahead and turn it on. It's got a pretty small LCD, as you can see here. This camera was actually released in 2004. So it's just about to have its 20th birthday. And to have a camera that's 20 years old that's still taking pictures good and is still really, really super fun to use. It's just a sign of the better build quality of a lot of the older digital cameras versus a lot of the no-name Chinese manufacturers that are producing cameras today. So there are some benefits to buying old and used digital vintage cameras, in my opinion. This camera's in good shape. As you can see, I would say it has a normal amount of wear, some wear to the bottom of the camera around the tripod mount as well. But the lens glass looks good, and the flash fires. It's got a big old flash here, just popped it up. Sometimes with prolonged use, this flash bulb can go out, and that's why I always test the flashes of older digital cameras whenever I'm thinking about purchasing them. So this guy's got a 12x optical zoom, which for its time was really excellent and still is really quite good. I mean, you can get quite close. They actually upgraded the image processor in this over its prior generation, DMC FZ10. Better color reproduction and is a little bit faster in autofocus as well than the FZ10. One of the things I have noticed is it is visibly noisy at ISO over a couple hundred. So lighting conditions are super important for this camera. And in a well-lit environment, either indoors or outdoors, it does a more than serviceable job even 20 years after this camera was released. And it's got a manual focus toggle on the side of the camera as well. Should you wish to do manual focus, you can utilize this wheel. So value-wise, this camera 5-6 years ago was literally only worth 30 or 40 bucks. And over the last couple years, there's been a little more interest in older super zoom Panasonics, both in the compact and bridge style. But this value, it's not like it's gone from 20 or 30 to 150. It's gone from 20 or 30 to about 50. So the value in the used market of a camera like this with this little replacement charger, you'd be looking at a value of about 50 bucks. Okay, this was a Facebook pickup. And we've got a regular DSLR camera here, Canon Rebel T3. And this was a 2-lens kit that I got. And I spent 125 bucks on this. But given that they were pretty close by, I didn't have to drive very far, I went ahead and made the deal. We've got a Canon 18-55 kit, which is right here. And on the body, we've got a 24mm wide angle lens that on this Rebel T3 is going to be closer to about a 35mm optical range, which is about what the human eye sees. So this is a really great walk around lens. One of my favorite lenses to shoot with, actually. So this camera's in good shape. That's one of the reasons why I went ahead and bought it. I was able to test it before I paid them the cold hard cash. And it takes good pictures. Let me go ahead and show you what we're looking at here. We got the menu. It's just a regular old Canon menu. And we're in autofocus. And it is missing the viewfinder, the rubber viewfinder cap. Those you can find on websites like eBay in bulk for around $1 to $3 a piece. So pretty inexpensive should you need to replace one. There is a little bit of dust visible through the viewfinder. I noticed that when I was taking pictures of it. So normally that's around the focus screen and doesn't actually affect the pictures taken. But you can always look at the output to make sure. Autofocus is working well. If we were in an unlit situation, the flash would pop up. I'll go ahead and do that real quick. And it's working as well. So even if the onboard flash isn't working because these cameras, DSLR cameras, have a hot shoe mount, you can always affix an external flash and at least get some flash functionality, maybe even better than the onboard flash, if the onboard flash is burnt out or not working. So food for thought there if you run into that yourself. But I was able to test the 18-55 as well, and the autofocus is working on that. If I had to pick between these two lenses, I'd take this guy every day. It's about $100, $125 new, maybe $150 new. But in the used market, it sells for about $100. And the Rebel T3 with the 18-55 kit normally sells for $125 to $150. So we'd be looking at a value estimate of, at the high range, of around $250 from my $125 purchase. So factor in all of the fees and expenses, about $100 profit on this buy. Pretty early Canon DSLR camera, and one of the best-selling DSLR cameras that Canon ever made was the Rebel T3. Pictures that you can get just out of this pretty simple kit, this value for this kit alone is about $200, is really excellent. Video capability, not great, but still images, which is what I always aim for because that's my passion, is still photography, does a more than serviceable job. Okay, got another garage sale find here. This guy is untested. There was no battery in it whenever I picked it up. It is a Canon Ixus 960IX. Uses the Canon NB5L battery. So let me go ahead and grab one of those. I've got a replacement right here. And let's see if this camera works. Power's on. Let's see if the, this lens toggle is super, not even sticky. It appears to have been bent, and it's a little bit loose on the top. So a little bit loose right here, and the zoom is not actually engaging. There we go, now it is. You've got to really push on it super hard. So it looks like maybe this was impacted a little bit here, and perhaps bent the ring around the zoom toggle. So this is a camera I'm gonna have to work on a little bit and see if I can get it into fully functioning condition. It's a bummer. Let's see if it takes pictures nonetheless. Yeah, took a picture. Let me put it into manual mode. See if we can get the flash to fire. Nope, flash isn't firing with the flash set to fill. So we've got a few issues on this camera. We've got a built-in flash not working, and we've got the zoom toggle issue. So this one is gonna be pretty challenging to get into a fully working condition. So I'm actually not gonna assign a value, and this is probably gonna be a loss of $5. But in good working shape, this particular model, the 960IS, is gonna sell in the $75 to $100 range. So that's why I went ahead and made that gamble. Because it does power on and does take pictures, it may have some nominal value. I could probably get 10 to 15 in the parts section on eBay. But once you factor in shipping costs and everything, that makes it not really even that worth it, especially if they end up returning it. So no value on this one, unfortunately. All right, what do we got in this case here? We are down to 4 cameras left. We've got a Nikon Coolpix P500. Yeah, I remember this. This is another garage sale find. On the side here. Ooh, random battery. Aha! A battery for a Sony camcorder. And I will save that. Nikon Coolpix P500. This is a $5 pickup. So this is a pretty early, well, the first in the 5 series of Nikon Coolpix's P500 series bridge cameras. It's like a 500 or 600 millimeter film equivalent, I think. So really good optical range in this camera. Uses the Nikon EL5 battery, I think. Let me spin over here. This camera was released in that 2012, 2013 timeframe, I believe. Lens a little bit noisy, but is working properly. Let's try taking a couple pictures and see if we can get that flash to fire. There's just a push button on the side for the flash engagement. Gonna work. There we go. Yeah, flash fires, takes good pictures. So the cool thing about this is it's got the side zoom toggle, which I'm gonna test right now. And it's got the top zoom toggle. So you want to test both of those if you're able to test it prior to purchase, just to make sure that both of them are working. In certain situations, I found that the zoom is not, but the top is, or sometimes the top is, but the side's not. So want to test that. The other thing I noticed with a lot of Nikon Coolpixes in the bridge camera is the way that these rim is molded, it's fairly weak. So if it gets bumped or jostled or even dropped a little bit, this can bend inward and make the lens engagement pretty challenging. So what you can do is actually take this off and either rebend it or leave it off, and it will generally tend to work just fine. Nikon Coolpix P500, you'd be looking at a value of this camera in the $75 range on a website like eBay in the United States. But the problem, like I said in my last video, with a lot of garage sale finds is I've got to go to a lot of garage sales to find cameras, because a lot of garage sales just have clothes and random assortments of knickknacks, and finding cameras can be pretty challenging. This was a cool one. This is a Fujifilm Finepix XP120. This is a waterproof camera in the XP line, and Fujifilm had the XP line that started, I think, with the XP10 many years ago, and has run all the way up to the XP140. So they've made over a dozen generations of this model. They all pretty much use the same battery too, which is pretty crazy, the Fujifilm NP45. This is a camera I spent 40 bucks on, and condition-wise is not as good as I had expected. From the pictures that I saw, there was just a couple pictures for this Facebook pickup, and I probably should have renegotiated the price. Because it's got a little bit of wear to the body, as you can see here, some scratches on the front, a little bit of wear on the side. I mean, otherwise it's in decent shape, but that will affect the value a little bit. And given that we're not working with a ton of margin here, that's just something I probably should have done. But oh well, you live and you learn. Some wear over here on the buttons as well. Let's go ahead and power it on. I actually noticed he had a bunch of family pictures still on there when I was testing the camera before I actually ended up paying for it, and was able to just give him the SD card that was in there. So he didn't have to lose any of his precious memories. So this is waterproof, I think, down to like, what, 40 feet maybe? Oh, 65 feet, okay. And a pretty popular waterproof model. I've used this in a variety of colors over the years. And even brought one down to the Caribbean when we went down there a few years ago. And takes good pictures, very reliable cameras. And flash is working, autofocus is working well, and it's taking good pics. So this is going to depend on that tiny little model number on the bottom in terms of its value. So the XP140 is one of the more recent versions that also shoots 4K video. It's going to have a value in the $150 to $200 range. This shoots 1080p video, and it's going to have a value in the $100 range. So not a huge return on investment on this camera, but it was a quick pickup, and should sell relatively quickly as well. So that was a good one. Second to last camera, we've got another bridge camera here. And this one is Sony, and we've got a Sony DSC H50 with a 15x optical zoom. This uses Sony's NP-BG1 battery. And I've got a bunch of BG1s over here. There we go. I think this uses the Memory Stick Pro Duo from memory. It might also have a hybrid with SD. Nope, Memory Stick Pro Duo. It's a longer, skinnier memory card. Okay, lens moves in and out. Oh, I bought this for $5 at a garage sale. Untested, no battery. They didn't know if it worked. Normally that's about the max that I'm willing to pay for this type of class of product, in that $5 to $10 range for untested cameras. Anything higher than that, it becomes a little bit risky. So lens is moving in and out fine. One of the cool features of this is it actually has night shot mode. So like a lot of the older Sony Cybershot cams, as well as their camcorders, which have night shot, you can flick it to night shot, and it uses infrared light in low light, and gives you that kind of Blair Witch type feel whenever you're taking pictures or shooting videos. So kind of a cool feature, and that's led to a little bit more value in this camera. Let me go ahead and try taking a few pictures and see how that works. It does have a just upward rotating LCD, and this camera came out in a similar time frame as that DMC FZ20, a little bit later than that. I think this is 8 megapixels if I'm not mistaken. And flash fires. Autofocus is working well, and the picture looks great. So this camera has normal wear, a little bit of wear to the LCD. What you see with older Sonys is a lot of the times the LCD protector that they used has been very scratched. So you'll see that when the camera is turned off. But on this particular example, it looks pretty good actually. So value on this camera in the used market is going to be in the $75 range if you pair this with a charger and potentially cables or a memory card. So this is another very good return, but you know, there's always a chance that this was broken and just becomes a pretty heavy paperweight. We are on to the last camera, and this is a Facebook Marketplace find. And I use Facebook Marketplace increasingly less these days just because there's a lot of time wasters on there, a lot of messages that go back and forth, and it's kind of become Craigslist in a way. Craigslist used to be a really good way to find cameras, and I don't even go on there anymore. So I kind of move from place to place depending upon where the action is and where people are selling their stuff. But increasingly, Facebook Marketplace is for time wasters and for physical retailers selling products. So it's become challenging to find stuff there as well. But this was a $20 find that I had. And the reason I was able to get this for such a good price was partly because they didn't have a battery for it. So I knew going in that I needed a specific type of battery, and that's the BP70 battery. So I brought one of those with me to the pickup and was able to test it, and it was working. So I ended up buying it, and they honored their price of $20. So this is a Samsung, very, very compact little 12x optical, really kind of a fun camera to shoot with. See, pretty good optical range there. And this was kind of at the height of Samsung's camera peak in the 2012 timeframe, I think, is around where this camera came out, maybe 2014. And Samsung was really at that point trying to increase their market share. They were in the NX mirrorless line. They had some really cool cameras there too. They were one of the first cameras to incorporate Android and Wi-Fi, and actually some had 3G cell capability with a chip installed. And this particular camera does have Wi-Fi as well, and I think it's 16 megapixels. Takes good pictures. They're a little bit soft around the edges from my experience, but I really like the textured front on this. They did this on a number of their models. They kind of incorporated and brought over a lot of technology and styling that they used in their cell phones into the camera world, because they were and still are a really big conglomerate of a lot of different types of industries. So they're a little bit unique in that regard. And this particular camera in the used market normally sells in the $75 to $100 range. So good return on investment on this one as well. And that is it. That was the last camera. So next video, we've got some cool stuff coming up in the next video for next week. I've got a Leica coming in. A Leica digital camera that I've sold a few times in the past, but I haven't seen in a long time. So that'll be fun to go through. I hope you stay tuned for that. And as always, get out there, have some fun, take some pictures.